Krishna, welcome to today's reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. Welcome to ISKCON Dublin. Welcome everyone online on Facebook, on YouTube channel and here. So we continue today from the second canto, which we started this week. We had the first chapter, verse 25, and as before we do that, we recite Bhagavatam Himastotha. Sanatana Swami. Sarva Shastreli Piyusham, Sarva Vedaika Satvalam, Sarva Siddhartha Sarva Lokaika Vitvaram. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all of the world. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu, Kalitanto di Kalitya, Shri Krishna Parivartitam. O life heir of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Patnaya, Prema Vakshaksharayate, Sarvanda Sarvasevaya, Shri Krishna Namastume. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madhika Bandha Matsangi, Madhuru Matmahadana, Madhishaya Kanapanya, Madhananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Sadutadayin Atini Chomachataraka Kalamitra Kadachimam Prema Hrit Kantayos Puram. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna, Hari Bol. Welcome again, everyone. Today we're continuing reading Srimad Bhagavatam, the second canto, first chapter, verse 25. So, translation. The gigantic universal form of the personality of God within the body of the universal shell, which is covered by sevenfold material elements, is the subject of the Virat conception. Purport. Simultaneously, the Lord has multifarious other forms, and all of them are identical with the original fountainhead form of the Lord Sri Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, it has been proven that the original transcendental and eternal form of the Lord is Sri Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead. But by his inconceivable internal potency, Atma-maya, he can expand himself by multifarious forms and incarnations simultaneously, without being diminished in his full potency. He is complete, and although innumerable complete forms emanate from him, he is still complete without any loss. That is his spiritual or eternal potency. In the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, manifested his Virat Rupa just to convince the less intelligent class of men who cannot conceive of the Lord as appearing just like a human being. Yet he actually has the potency of his claim to be the supreme absolute person without any rival or superior. Materialistic man can think, although very imperfectly, of the huge universal space comprehending an innumerable number of planets as big as the sun. They can see only the circular sky overhead without any information that this universe, as well as many other hundreds of thousands of universes, are each covered by sevenfold material coverings of water, fire, air, sky, ego, noumenon, and material nature, just like a huge football, pumped and covered, floating on the water of the causal ocean, wherein the Lord is lying as Mahavishnu. All the universes in seed are emanating from the breathing of the Mahavishnu, who is but part of a partial expansion of the Lord. And all the universes presided over by the Brahmas vanish when the Mahavishnu's withdraw his great breath. In this way, the material world are being created and vanished by the supreme will of the Lord. The poor foolish materialist can just imagine how ignorantly he puts forward an insignificant creature to become his rival incarnation, simply on the allegations of a dying man. The Virat Rupa was particularly exhibited by the Lord just to give lessons to such foolish men, so that one can accept a person as the incarnation of Godhead only if such a person is able to exhibit such a Virat Rupa as Lord Krishna did. It's interesting, we're just reading this in Bhagavad Gita, the same thing in the last few weeks. So we're now somewhere at the end of the 11th, 11th chapter in Bhagavad Gita. So we're getting some more insight here. It's actually really nice to get more commentary on it. The materialistic person may concentrate his mind upon the Virat or gigantic form of the Lord in his own interest, and as recommended by Srikadeva Goswami, but he must be on his guard not to be misled by pretenders who claim to be the identical person as Lord Krishna, but are not able to act like him or exhibit the Virat Rupa, comprehending the whole of the universe. It's also mentioned that that was done by Krishna for the future, for all the futures, so to be able to distinguish between those incarnations of Krishna which are bona fide, authentic, or those who are not. Those who are able to show the universe, universal form, that's like a check or a proof. That's one of the reasons for it. So verse 26. Persons who have realized it have studied that the planets known as Patala constitute the bottoms of the feet of the universal Lord, and the heels and the toes are the Rasatala planets. The ankles are the Mahatala planets, and his shanks constitute the Talatala planets. Purport. Outside the bodily existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the manifested cosmic existence has no reality. Everything and anything of the manifested world rests on him, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.4, but that does not imply that everything and anything in the vision of the materialist is the Supreme Personality. The conception of the universal form of the Lord gives a chance to the materialist to think of the Supreme Lord, but the materialist must know for certain that his visualization of the world in a spirit of lording over it is not God realization. The materialistic view of exploitation of the material resources is occasioned by the illusion of the external energy of the Lord, and as such, if anyone wants to realize the supreme truth by conceiving of the universal form of the Lord, he must cultivate the service attitude. Unless the service attitude is revived, the conception of Virat realization will have very little effect on the seer. The transcendental Lord, in any conception of his form, is never a part of the material creation. He keeps his identity as the Supreme Spirit in all circumstances, and is never affected by the three material qualities, for everything material is contaminated. The Lord always exists by his internal energy. The universe is divided into 14 planetary systems. 7 planetary systems, called Bur, Bhuva, Swaha, Mahar, Janas, Tapas, and Satya, are upward planetary systems, one above the other. There are also 7 planetary systems downward, known as Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala, gradually one below the other. In this verse, the description begins from the bottom, because it is in the line of devotion that the Lord's bodily description should begin from his feet. Srikadeva Goswami is a recognized devotee of the Lord, and he is exactly correct in the description. 27. The knees of the universal form are the planetary system of the name Sutala, and the two thighs are the Vitala and Atala planetary systems. The hips are Mahitala, and an outer space is the depression of his navel. 28. The chest of the original personality of the gigantic form is the luminary planetary system. His neck is the Mahar planets, his mouth is the Janas planets, and his forehead is the Tapas planetary system. The topmost planetary system, known as Satyaloka, is the head of he who has 1,000 heads. Purple. The effulgent luminary planets, like the sun and the moon, are situated almost in the mid-place of the universe, and as such they are to be known as the chest of the original gigantic form of the Lord. And above the luminary planets, called also the heavenly planets, places of the universal directorate demigods, are the Mahar, Janas, and Tapas planetary systems. And above all, the Satyaloka planetary system, where the chief directors of the modes of material nature reside, namely Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. This Vishnu is known as the Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, and he acts as the supersoul in every living being. There are innumerable universes floating on the causal ocean, and each of them the representation of the Virat form of the Lord is there, along with innumerable suns, moons, heavenly demigods, Brahmas, Vishnus, and Shivas, all of them situated in one part of the inconceivable potency of Lord Krishna, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 10, verse 29. His arms are the demigods headed by Indra. The 10 directional sights are his ears, and physical sound is his sense of hearing. His nostrils are the 2 Ashwini Kumaras, and material fragrance is his sense of smell. His mouth is the blazing fire. Purport. The description of the gigantic form of the personality in God made in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is further explained here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The description in the Bhagavad Gita 11:30 runs as follows. O Vishnu, I see you devouring all people in your blazing mouths and covering all the universe by your immeasurable rays. Scorching of your manifest. End quote. In that statement of the Bhagavad Gita, both of them are the signs of Krishna, the absolute truth, and so they are independent. The conception of the Virat Purusha, or the gigantic form of the Supreme Lord, is said to include all the dominating demigods as well as the dominated living beings. Even the minutest part of a living being is controlled by the empowered agency of the Lord. Since the demigods are included in the gigantic form of the Lord, worship of the Lord, whether in his gigantic material conception or in his eternal transcendental form as Lord Shri Krishna, also appeases the demigods and all the other parts and parcels, as much as watering the root of a tree distributes energy to all of the tree's other parts. Consequently, for a materialist also, worship of the universal gigantic form of the Lord leads one to the right path. One need not risk being misled by approaching many demigods for fulfillment of different desires. The real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him only. 30. The sphere of outer space constitutes his eye pits, and the eyeball is the sun as the power of seeing. His eyelids are both the day and night, and in the movements of his eyebrows, the Brahma and similar Supreme Personality reside. His palate is the direction of water, Varuna, and the juice or essence of everything is his tongue. Purport. To common sense, the description in this verse appears to be somewhat contradictory, because sometimes the sun has been described as the eyeball, and sometimes as the outer space sphere. But there is no room for common sense in the injunctions of the Shastras. We must accept the description of the Shastras and concentrate more on the form of the Virat Rupa than on common sense. Common sense is always imperfect, whereas the description in the Shastras is always perfect and complete. If there is any incongruity, it is due to our imperfection and not the Shastras. That is the method of approaching Vedic wisdom. 31. They say that the Vedic hymns are the cerebral passage from the Lord, and his jaws of teeth are Yama, god of death, who punishes the sinners. The art of affection is his set of teeth, and the most alluring illusory material energy is his smile. This great ocean of material creation is but the casting of his glance over us. Purport. According to Vedic assertion, this material creation is the result of the Lord's casting a glance over the material energy, which is described herein as the most alluring illusory energy. The conditioned souls who are allured by such materialism should know that the material temporary creation is simply an imitation of the reality, and that those who are captivated by such alluring glances of the Lord are put under the direction of the controller of sinners called Yamaraj. The Lord smiles affectionately, displaying his teeth. The intelligent person who can grasp this truth about the Lord becomes a soul fully surrendered unto him. 32. Modesty is the upper portion of his lips. Hankering is his chin. Religion is the breast of the Lord, and irreligion is his back. Brahmaji, who generates all living beings in the material world, is his genitals, and the Mitra Varunas are his two testicles. The ocean is his waist, and the hills and mountains are the stacks of his bones. Purport. The Supreme Lord is not impersonal as misconceived by less intelligent thinkers. Rather, he is the Supreme Person as confirmed in all authentic Vedic literatures. But his personality is different from what we can conceive. It is stated here that Brahmaji acts as his genitals and that the Mitra Varunas are his two testicles. This means that as a person he is complete with all bodily organs, but they are of different types with different potencies. When the Lord is described as impersonal, therefore, it should be understood that his personality is not exactly the type of personality found within our imperfect speculation. One can, however, worship the Lord even by seeing the hills and mountains or the ocean and the sky as different parts and parcels of the gigantic body of the Lord, the Virat Purusha. The Virat Rupa as exhibited by Lord Krishna to Arjuna is a challenge to the unbelievers. What are they called, unbelievers? Another word. No. Anyone remembers the word in Sanskrit for unbelievers?
Gnostic.
Yeah. Our Pandit section. or in Christianity, atheists. Or in Christianity, they like to call them heretics. Like, it's kind of strong word. Be against unbelievers, sinners. O king, the rivers are the veins of the gigantic body, the trees are the hairs of his body, and the omnipotent air is his breath. The passing ages are his movements, and his activities are the reactions of the three modes of material nature. Purport. The personality of God is not a dead stone, nor is he inactive, as is poorly taught by some schools. He moves with the progress of time, and therefore knows all about the past and future, along with his present activities. There is nothing unknown to him. The conditioned souls are driven by the reactions of the modes of material nature, which are the activities of the Lord. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7.12, the modes of nature act under his direction only, and as such, no natural functions are blind or automatic. The power behind the activities is the supervision of the Lord, and thus the Lord is never inactive as is wrongly conceived. The Vedas say that the Supreme Lord has nothing to do personally, as is always the case with superiors, but everything is done by his direction. As it is said, not a blade of grass moves without his sanction. In the Brahma Samhita, It is said that all the universes and the heads of them, the Brahmas, exist only for the duration of his breathing period. The same is confirmed here. The air on which the universes and the planets within the universes exist is nothing but a bit of the breath of the unchallengeable Virat Purusha. So even by studying the rivers, the trees, air, and passing ages, one can conceive of the personality of Godhead without being misled by the formless conception of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that those who are much inclined to the formless conception of the Supreme Truth are more troubled than those who can intelligently conceive of the personal form. Prabhupada here talks a lot about impersonalists because they focus when they study the Gita on Virat Purusha and they use it for their impersonal gain. So that's why Prabhupada here gives them a kick and proves that actually they are wrong. Best amongst the Kurus, the clouds which carry water are the hairs on his head. The terminations of days or nights are his dress, and the supreme cause of material creation is his intelligence. His mind is the moon, the reservoir of all changes. It's 2:35. The principle of matter, Mahatattva, is the consciousness of the omnipresent Lord, as asserted by the experts, and Rudradeva is his ego. The horse, mule, camel, and elephant are his nails, and wild animals and all quadrupeds are situated in the belt zone of the Lord. 36. Varieties of birds are indications of his masterful artistic sense. Manu, the father of mankind, is the emblem of his standard intelligence, and humanity is his residence. The celestial species of human beings, like the Gandharvas, Vidyadharas, Charanas, and angels, all represent his musical rhythm, and the demoniac soldiers are representations of his wonderful prowess. Purport. The aesthetic sense of the Lord is manifested in the artistic, colorful creation of varieties of birds like the peacock, parrot, and cuckoo. The celestial species of human beings like the Gandharvas and the Vidyadharas can sing wonderfully and can entice even the minds of the heavenly demigods. Their musical rhythm represents the musical sense of the Lord. How then can he be impersonal? His musical taste, artistic sense, and standard intelligence, which is never fallible, are different signs of his supreme personality. The Manu Samhita is the standard law book for humanity, and every human being is advised to follow this great book of social knowledge. Human society is the residential quarters for the Lord. This means that a human being is meant for God realization and association with God. This life is a chance for the conditioned soul to regain his eternal God consciousness and thus fulfill the mission of life. Maharaj Prahlad is the right type of representative of the Lord in the family of Asuras. None of the living beings is away from the Lord's gigantic body. Each and every one has a particular duty in relation to the Supreme Body. Disruption in the matter of discharging the specific duty assigned to each and every living being is the cause of disharmony between one living being and another. But when the relation is re-established in relation to the Supreme Lord, there is complete unity between all living beings, even up to the limit of the wild animals and human society. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu displayed this living unity in the jungle of Madhya Pradesh, where even the tigers, elephants, and many other ferocious animals perfectly cooperated in glorifying the Supreme Lord. That is the way to peace and amity all over the world. 37. The Virat Purusha's face is the Brahmanas, his arms are the Kshatriyas, his thighs are the Vaishyas, and the Shudras are under the protection of his feet. All the worshipful demigods are also overtaken by him, and it is the duty of everyone to perform sacrifices with feasible goods to appease the Lord. Purport. Monotheism is practically suggested here. Offering sacrifices to many demigods under different names is mentioned in the Vedic literatures, but the suggestion made in this verse is that all those varieties of demigods are included in the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are only the parts and parcels of the original whole. Similarly, the divisions of the orders of human society, namely the Brahmanas, the intelligent class, the Kshatriyas, the administrators, the Vaishyas, the mercantile community, and the Shudras, the laborer class, are all included in the body of the Supreme. As such, sacrifice by every one of them in terms of pleasing the Supreme by feasible goods is recommended. Generally, the sacrifice is offered with clarified butter and grains, but with the progress of time, human society has produced varieties of goods by transforming materials supplied by God's material nature. Human society, therefore, must learn to offer sacrifices not only with clarified butter, but also with other manufactured goods in the propagation of the Lord's glory, and that will bring about perfection in the human society. The intelligent class of men, or Brahmanas, may give direction for such sacrifices in consultation with the previous acharyas. The administrators may give all facilities to perform such sacrifices. The Vaishya class, or mercantile community, who produce such goods, may offer them for sacrifice, and the Shudra class may offer them manual labor for the successful termination of such sacrifice. Thus, by the cooperation of all classes of human beings, the sacrifice recommended in this age, namely the sacrifice of congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord, may be executed for the common welfare of all the people of the world. 38. I have thus explained to you the gross material gigantic conception of the personality of Godhead. One who seriously desires liberation concentrates his mind on this form of the Lord, because there is nothing more than this in the material world. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.10, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has verily explained that the material nature is only an order-carrying agent of His. She is one of the different potencies of the Lord, and she acts under His direction only. As the Supreme Transcendental Lord, He simply casts a glance over the material principle, and thus the agitation of matter begins, and the resultant actions are manifested one after another by 6 kinds of gradual differentiations. All material creation is moving in that way, and thus it appears and disappears in due course. Less intelligent persons with a poor fund of knowledge cannot accommodate the thought of this inconceivable potency of the Lord Sri Krishna, by which He appears just like a human being. His appearance in the material world as one of us is also His causeless mercy upon the fallen souls. He is transcendental to all material conceptions, but by His unbounded mercy upon His pure devotees, He comes down and manifests Himself as the personality of Godhead. Materialistic philosophers and scientists are too much engrossed with atomic energy and the gigantic situation of the universal form, and they offer respect more seriously to the external phenomenal feature of material manifestations than to the nominal principle of spiritual existence. Nominal is like Latin word for what does it mean? I don't know what it is. Well, I can tell you what says in the dictionary. Metaphysics, the noumenon is a posited object or event that exists independently of human sense and of perception. So you get it? I know it's okay. So it's contrasted with phenomenon. So it's that of the divine. Right? The transcendental form of the Lord is beyond the jurisdiction of such materialistic activities. And it is very difficult to conceive that the Lord can be simultaneously localized and all-pervasive, because the materialistic philosophers and scientists think of everything in terms of their own experience. Because they are unable to accept the personal feature of the Supreme Lord, the Lord is kind enough to demonstrate the Virat feature of his transcendental form, and herein Srila Shukadeva Goswami has vividly described this form of the Lord. He concludes that there is nothing beyond this gigantic feature of the Lord. None of the materialistic, thoughtful men can go beyond this conception of the gigantic form. The minds of the materialistic men are flickering and constantly changing from one aspect to another. Therefore, one is advised to think of the Lord by thinking of any part of his gigantic body. And by one's intelligence only, one can think of him in any manifestation of the material world. The forest, the hill, the ocean, the man, the animal, the demigod, the bird, the beasts, or anything else. Each and every item of the material manifestation entails a part of the body of the gigantic form, and thus the flickering mind can be fixed in the Lord only and nothing else. This process of concentrating on the different bodily parts of the Lord will gradually diminish the demoniac challenge of godlessness and bring about gradual development of devotional service to the Lord. Everything being a part and parcel of the complete whole, the neophyte student will gradually realize the hymns of Ishapanishad, which state that the Supreme Lord is everywhere, and thus he will learn the art of not committing any offense to the body of the Lord. This sense of God-mindedness will diminish one's pride in challenging the existence of God. Thus one can learn to show respect to everything, for all things are parts and parcels of the Supreme Body. Which is the verse Ishapanishad that's mentioned? The first one, right? I think that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's the one. That's
He's the
confirmed.
one.
Our section, Pandit section.
Yeah.
Good. Confirmed. 39. One should concentrate his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who alone distributes himself in so many manifestations, just as ordinary persons create thousands of manifestations in dreams. One must concentrate the mind on him, the only all-blissful absolute truth. Otherwise, one will be misled and will cause his own degradation. Purport. In this verse, the process of devotional service is indicated by the great Goswami, Srila Shukadeva. He tries to impress upon us that instead of diverting our attention to several branches of self-realization, we should concentrate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the supreme object of realization, worship, and devotion. Self-realization is, as it were, offering a fight for eternal life against the material struggle for existence. And therefore, by the illusory grace of the external energy, the yogi or the devotee is faced with many allurements which can entangle a great fighter again in the bondage of material existence. A yogi can attain miraculous successes in material achievements, such as anima and lagima, by which one can become more minute than the minutest or lighter than the lightest. Or in the ordinary sense, one may achieve material benedictions in the shape of wealth and women. But one is warned against such allurements, because entanglement again in such illusory pleasure means degradation of the self and further imprisonment in the material world. By this warning, one should follow one's vigilant intelligence only. The Supreme Lord is one, and his expansions are various. He is therefore the supersoul of everything. When a man sees anything, he must know that his seeing is secondary and the Lord's seeing is primary. One cannot see anything without the Lord's having first seen it. That is the instruction of the Vedas and the Upanishads. So whatever we see or do, the supersoul of all acts of seeing or doing is the Lord. This theory of simultaneously oneness and difference between the individual soul and the supersoul is propounded by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the philosophy of Achintya Veda Veda Tattva. The Virat Rupa, or the gigantic feature of the Supreme Lord, includes everything materially manifested. And therefore the Virat, or gigantic feature of the Lord, is the supersoul of all living and non-living entities. But the Virat Rupa is also the manifestation of Narayana or Vishnu. And going further on and on, one will eventually see that Lord Krishna is the ultimate supersoul of everything that be. The conclusion is that one should unhesitatingly become a worshipper of Lord Krishna, or for that matter, his plenary extension Narayana, and none else. In the Vedic hymns, it is clearly said that first of all, Narayana cast a glance over matter, and thus there was creation. Before creation, there was neither Brahma nor Shiva, and what to speak of others. Sripad Shankaracharya has definitely accepted this, that Narayana is beyond the material creation, and that all others are within the material creation. The whole material creation, therefore, is one with and different from Narayana simultaneously, and this supports the Achintya Veda Veda Tattva philosophy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Being an emanation from the cleansing potency of Narayana, the whole material creation is not different from him. But because it is the effect of his external energy, Bahiranga Maya, and is aloof from the eternal potency, Atma Maya, the whole material creation is different from him at the same time. The example given in this verse very nicely is that of the dreaming man. The dreaming man creates many things in his dream, and thus he himself becomes the entangled seer of the dream, and is also affected by their consequences. This material creation is also exactly a dreamlike creation of the Lord. But he, being the transcendental supersoul, is neither entangled nor affected by the reactions of such a dreamlike creation. He is always in his transcendental position, but essentially he is everything, and nothing is apart from him. As a part of him, one should therefore concentrate on him only, without deviation. Otherwise, one is sure to be overcome by the potencies of the material creation, one after the another. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita as follows: Sarva Bhutani Kanteya Prakriti Yanti Madhikam Kalpakshaya Purastani Kalpado Visjanmaham. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, every material manifestation enters into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, are again created. The human life, however, is an opportunity to get out of this repetition of creation and annihilation. It is a means whereby one may escape the Lord's external potency and enter into his internal potency. Thus end the Bhaktivinoda purports of the second canto, first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The First Step in God Realization. So going to second step. Second chapter. It's entitled The Lord in the Heart. Okay. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, it is still Shukadeva Goswami talking to Persian knowledge. Formerly, prior to the manifestation of the cosmos, Lord Brahma, by meditating on the Virat Rupa, regained his lost consciousness by appeasing the Lord. Thus he was able to rebuild the creation as it was before. Purport. The example cited herein of Sri Brahmaji is one of the forgetfulness. Brahmaji is the incarnation of one of the mundane attributes of the Lord. Being the incarnation of the passion mode of material nature, he is empowered by the Lord to generate the beautiful material manifestation. Yet, due to his being one of the numerous living entities, he is apt to forget the end of his creator. There's something missing here. He is apt to forget the. What does it say there in the book? I lost.
Which
says
is it the first one?
he's apt to forget the end.
Is it the first one you're reading?
No, it's this page. This page.
Second chapter, second sentence in the purple. Third sentence. Yet due to his being one of the numerous living entities, he is apt to forget the looks like something.
This forgetfulness in living. Oh, he's apt to forget the art of his creative energy.
I don't have this. It's almost. I have A-N. That's it. What is this? So here another correction. Even in yours ones, I noticed when we were there in Govardhan Hill, we were reading from it, and my word match was using this version, and there were also mistakes there, certain mistakes, certain things.
The Veda-based one is the most recent one, I think.
Yeah, because they can immediately correct. So yeah, while we were reading, they're also making notes for correction. If they're not already there. So, this sentence again. Yet, due to his being one of the numerous living entities, he is apt to forget the art of his creative energy. This forgetfulness of the living being, beginning from Brahman down to the lowest insignificant end, is a tendency which can be counteracted by meditation on the Virat Rupa of the Lord. This chance is available in the human form of life, and if a human being follows the instruction of Srimad Bhagavatam and begins to meditate upon the Virat Rupa, then the revival of his pure consciousness and counteraction of the tendency to forget his eternal relationship with the Lord can follow simultaneously. And as soon as this forgetfulness is removed, the Vyavasaya Buddhi, as mentioned here and in the Bhagavad Gita 2:41, follows at once. This ascertained knowledge of the living being leads to loving service to the Lord, which the living being requires. The kingdom of God is unlimited. Therefore, the number of the assisted hands of the Lord is also unlimited. The Bhagavad Gita 13:14 asserts that the Lord has his hands, legs, eyes, and mouths in every nook and corner of his creation. This means that the expansions of differentiated parts and parcels called jivas, or living entities, are assisting hands of the Lord. And all of them are meant for rendering a particular pattern of service to the Lord. The conditioned soul, even in the position of Brahman, forgets this by the influence of illusory material energy generated out of false egoism. One can counteract such false egoism by invoking God consciousness. Liberation means getting out of the slumber of forgetfulness and becoming situated in the real loving service of the Lord, as exemplified in the case of Brahma. The service of Brahma is the sample of service in liberation, distinguished from the so-called altruistic services, full of mistakes and forgetfulness. Liberation is never inaction, but service without human mistakes. So liberation is equated here to service without human mistakes. No, it's never heard. Second, 222. The way of presentation of the Vedic sounds is so bewildering that it directs the intelligence of the people to meaningless things like the heavenly kingdoms. The conditioned souls hover in dreams of such heavenly illusory pleasures, but actually they do not relish any tangible happiness in such places. Purpose. The conditioned soul is always engaged in laying out plans for happiness within the material world, even up to the end of the universal limit. He is not even satisfied with available amenities of this planet Earth, where he has exploited the resources of nature to the best of his ability. He wants to go to the moon or the planet Venus to exploit resources there. But the Lord has warned us in the Bhagavad Gita 8:16 about the worthlessness of all the innumerable planets of this universe, as well as those planets within our other systems. There are innumerable universes and also innumerable planets in each of them. But none of them is immune to the chief miseries of material existence, namely the pangs of birth, the pangs of death, the pangs of old age, and the pangs of disease. The Lord says that even the topmost planet, known as the Brahmaloka or Satyaloka, and what to speak of other planets like the heavenly planets, is not a happy land for residential purposes, due to the presence of material pangs, as above mentioned. Conditioned souls are strictly under the laws of fruitive activities, and as such they sometimes go up to Brahmaloka and again come down to Patalaloka, as if they were unintelligent children on a merry-go-round. The real happiness is in the kingdom of God, where no one has to undergo the pangs of material existence. Therefore, the Vedic ways of fruitive activities for the living entities are misleading. One thinks of the superior way of life in this country or that, or on this planet or another, but nowhere in the material world can he fulfill his real desire of life, namely eternal life, full intelligence, and complete bliss. Indirectly, Srila Shukadeva Goswami affirms that Maharaj Parikshit, in the last stage of life, should not desire to transfer himself to the so-called heavenly planets, but should prepare himself for going back home, back to Godhead. None of the material planets, nor the amenities available there for living conditions, is everlasting. Therefore, one must have a factual reluctance to enjoy such temporary happiness as they afford. For this reason, the enlightened person should endeavor only for the minimum necessities of life while in the world of names. He should be intelligently fixed and never endeavor for unwanted things, being competent to perceive practically that all such endeavors are merely hard labor from nothing. Purport. The Bhagavad Dharma, or the cult of Srimad Bhagavatam, is perfectly distinct from the way of fruitive activities, which are considered by the devotees to be merely a waste of time. The whole universe, or for that matter all material existence, is moving on as Jagat, simply for planning businesses to make one's position very comfortable or secure. Although everyone sees that this existence is neither comfortable nor secure, and can never become comfortable or secure at any stage of development. Those who are captivated by the illusory advancement of material civilization, following the way of phantasmagoria, are certainly madmen. The whole material creation is a jugglery of names only. In fact, it is nothing but a bewildering creation of matter like earth, water, and fire. The buildings, furniture, cars, bungalows, mills, factories, industries, peace, war, or even the highest perfection of material science, namely atomic energy and electronics, are all simply bewildering names of material elements with their concomitant reactions of the three modes. Since the devotee of the Lord knows them perfectly well, he is not interested in creating unwanted things for a situation which is not at all reality, but simply names of no more significance than the babble of sea waves. Bubble, I guess.
Bubble.
Yeah, it's babble.
It's bubble, yes.
Yeah, it's bubble. Babble is like when you speak incoherent. The great kings, leaders, and soldiers fight with one another in order to perpetuate their names in history. They are forgotten in due course of time, and they make a place for another era in history. But the devotee realizes how much history and historical persons are useless products of flickering time. The fruitive worker aspires after a big fortune in the matter of wealth, women, and worldly adoration, but those who are fixed in perfect reality are not at all interested in such false things. For them, it is all a waste of time. Since every second of human life is important, an enlightened man should be very careful to utilize time very cautiously. 1 second of human life wasted in the vain research of planning for happiness in the material world can never be replaced, even if one spends millions of coins of gold. Therefore, the transcendentalist desiring freedom from the clutches of Maya, or the illusory activities of life, is warned herewith not to be captivated by the external features of fruitive actors. Human life is never meant for sense gratification, but for self-realization. Srimad Bhagavatam instructs us solely on this subject from the very beginning to the end. Human life is simply meant for self-realization. The civilization, which aims at this utmost perfection, never indulges in creating unwanted things, and such a perfect civilization prepares man only to accept the bare necessities of life or to follow the principle of the best use of a bad bargain. Our material bodies and our lives in that connection are bad bargains, because the living entity is actually spirit, and spiritual advancement of the living entity is absolutely necessary. Human life is intended for the realization of this important factor, and one should act accordingly, accepting only the bare necessities of life and depending more on God's gift without diversion of human energy for any other purpose, such as being meant for material enjoyment. The materialistic advancement of civilization is called the civilization of the demons, which ultimately ends in wars and scarcity. The transcendentalist is specifically warned herewith to be fixed in mind, so that even if there is difficulty in plain living and high thinking, he will not budge even an inch from his stark determination. For a transcendentalist, it is a suicidal policy to be intimately in touch with the sense gratifiers of the world, because such a policy will frustrate the ultimate gain of life. Shukadeva Goswami met Maharaj Parikshit when the latter felt a necessity for such a meeting. It is the duty of a transcendentalist to help persons who desire real salvation and to support the cause of salvation. One might know that Shukadeva Goswami never met Maharaj Parikshit while he was ruling as a great king. For a transcendentalist, the mode of activities is explained in the next shloka. 4. When there are ample earthly flats to lie on, what is the necessity of cots and beds? When one can use his own arms, what is the necessity of a pillow? When one can use the palms of his hands, what is the necessity of varieties of utensils? When there is ample covering or the skins of trees, what is the necessity of clothing? I heard this verse in the Brahmacharya Ashram.
Austerity.
What pillow? You show your hands. But it's nice to eat with hands. Last finish. But pillows also. Purport. The necessities of life for the protection and comfort of the body must not be unnecessarily increased. Human energy is spoiled in the vain search after such illusory happiness. If one is able to lie down on the floor, then why should one endeavor to get a good bedstead, or soft cushion to lie on? If one can rest without any pillow and make use of the soft arms endowed with by nature, there is no necessity of searching after a pillow. If we make a study of the general life of the animals, we can see that they have no intelligence for building big houses, furniture, and other household paraphernalia, and yet they maintain a healthy life by lying down on the open land. They do not know how to cook or prepare foodstuff, yet they still live healthy lives more easily than the human being. This does not mean that human civilization should revert to animal life, or that a human being should live naked in the jungles without any culture, education, and sense of morality. An intelligent human cannot live the life of an animal. Rather, man should try to utilize his intelligence in arts and science, poetry and philosophy. In such a way he can further the progressive march of human civilization. But here, the idea given by Srila Shukadeva Goswami is that the reserve energy of human life, which is far superior to that of animals, should simply be utilized for self-realization. Advancement of human civilization must be towards the goal of establishing our lost relationship with God, which is not possible in any form of life other than the human. One must realize the nullity. Is that also written there? Nullity. One must realize the nullity of the material phenomenon, considering it a passing phantasmagoria, and must endeavor to make a solution to the miseries of life. Self-complacence with a polished type of animal civilization geared to sense gratification is delusion. And such a civilization in brackets, or what is it called? In quote, yeah. And such a civilization is not worthy of the name. In pursuit of such false activities, a human being is in the clutches of Maya or illusion. Great sages and saints in the days of yore were not living in palatial buildings furnished with good fortune and so-called amenities of life. They used to live in huts and groves and sit on the flat ground, and yet they have left immense treasures of high knowledge with all perfection. Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami were high-ranking ministers of state, but they were able to leave behind them immense writings on transcendental knowledge, while residing only for one night underneath one tree. They did not live even 2 nights under the same tree, and what to speak of well-furnished rooms with modern amenities. And still, they were able to give us most important literatures of self-realization. So-called comforts of life are not actually helpful for progressive civilization. Rather, they are detrimental to such progressive life. In the system of Sanatana Dharma, of 4 divisions of social life and 4 orders of progressive realization, there are ample opportunities and sufficient directions for a happy termination of the progressive life. And the sincere followers are advised therein to accept a voluntary life of renunciation in order to achieve the desired goal of life. If one is not accustomed to abiding by the life of renunciation and self-abnegation from the beginning, one should try to get into the habit at the later stage of life, as recommended by Srila Shukadeva Goswami, and that will help one to achieve the desired success. So that's implying the Varnashram Dharma, Varnacharya Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. I think we will stop here. Any comments, Pavits? No? Just agree what the Acharya says? Yeah? All good? No mistakes? Sorry for the mistakes today.
Just the last verse, how does it relate to our situation now? Like, the way he's saying that...
Comforts.
Yeah, the comforts, yeah.
Well, this is the highest. I mean, Prabhupada is emphasizing the highest, but then he says, if one is not accustomed to this kind of life, then you go at a later stage of life. It's just certain stage of life you should renounce it. But this system is devised and divided by going through. This is basically for majority. By going through, you automatically then renounce it. Okay, I've done it. I had enough, and I've seen it, experienced. It's not what will bring me ultimate joy. Kids grow up. Everyone gets older. The body deteriorates. So, family members pass away or elderly. So it naturally kind of this happens at the later stage. So it's devised like that to then, okay, but then is the time when everything kind of grows naturally, that we focus on our supreme existence. I think that's the purpose here. I mean, it sounds like a bit kind of heavy, but it's not. That was his Prabhupada's main preaching that he would just announce at the beginning. Most of them, or everyone, was just announced everything because they were not into family lives anyway. Those first who joined, they were just wanderers. better for them. But anyway. So don't worry, we are following the right way. We're going the sure way. It's the sure way, or the right. I guess the others can maybe say a bit more. Or lectures on this verse, probably they would touch this topic. If you want to hear more.
Like in practical sense, if you're going to walk, you won't be wearing clothes from a tree bark.
Oh, that.
You have a proper clothes on you. You have a dress code. So it's kind of, it's applicable to some people who are maybe in yogis meditating in the forest. But if you're in a grihastha life, or you have to go to work and things like that, you can apply this. I mean,
no, it's not for you.
yeah.
No, we also have to see where Shuka they're talking to Parikshit.
Yeah.
And Parikshit Maharaj had all the comforts of a king before, but so we have to see the circumstances which are being told. But if you have no obligations in life, so he came to the stage when naturally the obligation just left because he had 7 days to live, so he could continue, ruling the place until the last breath. Say, oh, I have to, but who will do it? Just hand it over immediately, and then just concentrate on the same. And then he was given all these instructions, the highest instruction for those who can give up or about to give up, because we all will give up one day. So to see that all the attachments they were there, so he was making sure all attachments would be gone, so he wouldn't desire any soft pillows for now. Just like we were just there in a forest, and he was going through. I don't know. Here was mentioned the practical bits that, to eradicate any material desire.
When we were going to Radhadesh, we were talking about, because we were going to stay in the bungalow, and then I think we were talking to Jivna, and Jivna was saying, there's no cushions there. Radhadesh to sit for the kirtan. I'm saying, then I said this verse to him, saying, if there's, what's the need of cushion when you have your arms? Then he's saying, oh, I'm an old man, I need some comfort.
There is Krishna excuses.
Yeah.
I'm sure.